Welcome to our next lesson. Let's talk about conditional statements where we need to check for a particular condition so that we will run certain pieces of code. And you may be familiar with this, such as the if statement. So if something is true, then we do something. Okay, let's start off. Let's say we have x is equal to 10, and then we'll say here if x is greater than 5, then we'll print x is greater than 5. Okay, that's all we'll run there. And if we run this, definitely x is greater than 5. In the previous lesson, we asked the user for input. Let's do an input here. We can do x is equal to input, and we'll say enter a number. Now we know that we want to do a comparison, therefore this has to be an integer. We'll convert this into an integer. And then instead of saying x, we can say the value is greater than 5. And let's run this. Enter a number, we'll say 4. Nothing happens. Because if you notice here, what happens is if the user enters a value, it goes into x. If we entered 4, so x is equivalent to 4. Is 4 greater than 5? It's not. Therefore, it doesn't do anything. Notice that in Python, anything that is indented underneath a particular statement means it will get executed as part of that statement. So I add here another print function and say print the value is greater than 5. Please try again. So if we run this and we'll enter 4, again, nothing happens. Watch now if I don't indent this. Yep. So you notice how this is indented, this one isn't. If I run this, enter a number, and I do 4, it'll say, please try again. No matter what I put in, if I run this now, and if I type in 10, which is greater than 5, it will now say the value is greater than 5, please try again. So this please try again will always be executed because it's not inside the if statement. So a clearer way to look at this is to always add spaces between so that you can see the proper indentation. But if I want this please try again to only appear if the value is greater than 5, I want it to be like this. Please try again. We'll keep that inside there. If you run this now, if I enter 4, nothing happens. If I run this now and I enter 10, which is 10 is greater than 5, it should run both of these. And you see that. Now, what if I want to say that it will only run, please try again, if it doesn't happen? I can actually go and do else and say else, please try again. So that when if this one is executed, this will not run. If this does not happen, then this will run. So this condition, which is what we call a Boolean, has to be true or false. If this is true, this will execute. If this is false, it will go to else, and then it will run that. So let's do this. So if we enter 4, see, 4 is not greater than 5, therefore it will print, please try again. If we run this again, and we'll type in 6, it'll only run the value is greater than 5. It will not run please try again because this was satisfied. It will run this. It will not run the else function anymore. Let's say that you wanted to have the user enter numbers that are greater than 5. Say input, enter a number greater than 5. And we'll do another one and we'll say int input, enter another number greater than 5. Now we want to do a check if both numbers are greater than 5. Now I said that Python is very English-like, and in English we could say if x1 and x2 is greater than 5, then we'll say print both numbers are greater than 5. So you want to do that. Let's see if this works. Actually, this is not going to work. So if we do enter number greater than 5 and we say 5, and then another number greater than 5, and let's say 6. And it'll say both numbers are greater than 5. Notice that the first number, 5, is not greater than 5. Okay. Watch this. If I run this again, this time to make sure, I'm going to put 3 and I'm going to put 2. Okay. It's not because 3 is not greater than 5. So let's run this again. And we'll do 3 and we'll do 6. Now this time it says both numbers are greater than 5. 3 is not greater than 5. The reason this happens is because what it's doing is it's checking x1 and x2 greater than 5. In English, we're saying that if x1 and x2 are greater than 5. But in Python, this is now how it's interpreted. The way it's interpreted is it's looking at x1 as a condition and checking if this is a condition. Now, how this works is that any value that is not 0 is true, and any value that is 0 is false. For example, let's test it here. So if, let's do y is equal to 1, and we'll do if just y, and it will say print true. And then since we've seen the else already, we'll do else for print false. You see, if 1, it becomes true. If I do -1, it's still true. But if I do 0, it's false. So it's actually looking at this. And if you enter any number aside from 0, this will always be true. Now, if this is true and this is true, then both are true, then this will execute. So as long as I don't enter a 0 up here, this will always happen. So let's test that. So if I now put in else and say print, and say one of them, or at least one of them are less than or equal to 5. So now if I run that, now if I put in 0 and then 6, 0 will always be false. So this is false. If this is false and true, so false and true will always be false. Okay, so let me explain that in a way. So if I do a markdown here, I'm just going to add here anything that is true and true. Let's change this to a markdown. True and true will always be true. Okay. False and false will always be false. Okay, because they have to be both true. If I do, did I spell this wrong? Okay. If I do false and true, there will still be false. The other operator is called or. If I do true or true, this will be true because only one of them needs to be true. So even if I do true or false, this will be true. If I do false or true, this will still be true. The only time this will be false if both of them are false. Okay, so let's test this. So let me add in another code here. So notice if I do if true or false, And I'll say print true, else, or print false. So true or false will always be true. If I do true and true, it'll be true. If I do false, oops, I spelled that wrong. For false, it'll be false. If I change this to and, false and false will be false. True and false will still be false. The only time it will be true, it will be both of them are true. Now, notice if I do x is equal to 1 and y is equal to 1. You do x and y. Similar to how we did it up here, x1 and x2. This is actually now your condition, not just the x2. And this is a condition in itself. That's why x1 and x1. So again, I said if it's not 0, it'll always be true. If I change this to 0, which is false, so false and true will be false. If I change this to a -1, that will still be true. Notice how true and true will be true. So just remember that when you're doing your conditions. Right? So let me delete these. I'll keep this as your reference. Now, let's expand on the if statements. So we'll do x is 5. Let's do y is equal to 10. Z is equal to 20. Now, let's say we want to check if x is greater than 5, and we say print x is greater than 5. Now, we can also do ELIF. ELIF means is rather than doing an else, we can actually add in another condition. We can say ELIF x is less than 5, and we can say print x is less than 5. Otherwise, what else is there? If x is not greater than 5 and x is not greater than 5, then else is probably 5. X is 5. See how we run this? X is 5. If I change this to 10, x is greater than 5 because 10 is greater than 5. It's not going to check these anymore because this one is already satisfied. Now, if I do, let's see, 3, and I run this, you see how 3 is not greater than 5, so this is false. It will go down here and check. Is x less than 5? So 3 is less than 5, therefore x is less than 5. And it will not run this anymore because that's an else. If you go back to the previous example of having it at 5, 5 is not greater than 5, false. Else if, or elif, 5 is not less than 5, so this is false. Else x is 5. So there's another way of using that. Now, we can even do a further check inside. And what if we can also do another if inside and say if y is greater than 10. And then say x is greater than 5, and then we say print and y is greater than 10. Now we want this to fit after this one. So what we'll do, remember what we did earlier? We can do end equals and add a space so that it prints this as well. Let's do the same for this one. ELIF, and let's say if y is less than 10, then we can do print and y is less than 10, and we can do another end here. Oops, space. Else x is 5 And we all know that if x is less than 5 and y is going to be 10. So there's no need to do another check. Let's see if our code is correct here. So we got x is 5 and y is 10 because x is 5 and y is 10. And notice how that works out quite nicely. If we do x is 4, that means this will be false. It will skip all of these. It will skip all of these. If this is false, it will now check if x is less than 5, which is true. But this is not going to display the one below. Why? Because y is 10. So if you run this, notice how it just says x is less than 5. Because 4 is not less than 5, so this is false. This will not run. X or 4 is less than 5, which is true. It will run this. But y is not less than 10. That's why this one did not run. Notice how it did not concatenate that. But if you change this to 9 and run this, notice now that it says x is less than 5 and y is less than 10. Okay? So you can do a nested if statement, and you can also have conditions such as this. You can even have another ELIF here if you wanted to. ELIF is y is less than 10. Okay, and we can do this here and run that there. What this happens now is that the y is less than 10 will also appear even if x is greater than 5. So if we do 6, now we have x greater than 5 and y is less than 10, because now it does that check as well here. But even if x is greater than 5, we keep that here, but we do y is 11. Notice how this will work. 6 is greater than 5. Yes, it will print this. But now it's going to check, is y greater than 10? Then it'll say y is greater than 10 rather than y is less than 10. So if we run this, see now y is greater than 10. So you have your nested if statements here as well. So you can do as many if statements as you want. You can do as deep nested as you want, depending on the logic that you want to put in. And we'll end here, and I'll see you on the next lesson.